Cox.
Hi, I'm Mark Westcott, and welcome to the Power of Great Questions.
And today we're interviewing Alister Gordon from HFL. Welcome, Alister.
Thank you for having me.
Alister, one of the first questions I always like to ask people is, when you look back over the last few years, what are the greatest things that you've achieved in regard to your business life, and how have Great Questions helped in regard to the progress that you've made over those years?
Great Questions have been crucial. They are the thing that makes the world go round, as far as I'm concerned. I think I've run several businesses and grown those businesses, maybe sold two of them. But fundamentally, those businesses were powered by people, and they were powered by people doing the right things for the right reasons. And we got clarity about what that was by asking a lot of questions, both of ourselves, of our customers, also asking questions about our competitors. What were they offering value? Where were the gaps for us to offer new value? Quite often those businesses were competing against much bigger businesses, so we needed to be sort of nimble and adaptive and so on. And the right questions would drive pretty much all of our meetings. I think in building those businesses, building people, and now what we do through HFL is building leaders, really helping leaders lead better. And that's all about the right questions. And as you know, both of you would know, as professional coaches, our job is to help the people that we're working with really find the right questions and explore what the right answers might be. So I think really the thing that we've enjoyed most doing, I think, is growing businesses and growing people and growing leaders and seeing them, progress. All of those things progress for the right reasons and adding good value. And so that's really what we've been doing. Okay,
fantastic. So let's have some examples of some of those questions, because obviously the people watching this program and listening to this are keen to try and get distilled, subtle and succinct questions that they can use in their own businesses and in their own personal lives. So Alister, if you had to pick three, what are the three best questions that you've found, and maybe some examples of how they've worked really well for you?
Sure. So, and I think you alluded importantly there to a question that works, both for me, works both in private life and in business life. And so almost all our meetings or assignments or coaching sessions or what have you, we would typically start with one simple question, which is, what does success look like? It's quite interesting. You deal with senior executives or you deal with junior executives, and sometimes they find it quite difficult to answer that question. They haven't really thought about it. A perfect example would be that, success would be I get promoted, right? I get the next role up, and when we say, so what, that's success, is it just getting the job title is success? That's what it's all about. You'd be happy then, and then when you begin to uncover and explore, you very quickly get to the point that it's not the promotion that they want at all. It might be kudos, it might be money, it might be seniority, it might be more challenge. There's a million reasons that actually they might want to get promoted, but getting promoted really isn't what success looks like. And particularly getting promoted and then failing at the higher level because they're not ready to be promoted, that doesn't look like success at all. So whether it's business or an individual or what have you, that's generally the question I start with. What does success look like, and do you really, really know the answer to that question?
Yeah, and that's not, great, if I may say, Alister. That's a great way to start off with people. Great question.
Yeah, and I just emphasise the point that quite a lot of the time people haven't actually thought about it, haven't perhaps given it as much attention as they should have done.
Okay, the second question, sorry, I'm going to keep him on a roll here, Alister. The second one. The first one is, what's success look like? So keep firing.
Yeah, so I think the second question typically is what's getting in the way of us being successful? What do we have to do to get from current point to desired point? And generally speaking, the answer to that question tends to be, it's that classic piece in coaching where people answer with the first couple of things that come to mind. But then when you really say, okay, well, we've got those two things, like the competition is strong and the market's tough and maybe we can't get the right people in our business or whatever the case may be. But generally speaking, there's a whole range of additional reasons that get all barriers, and excuse me, exploring down to that level really begins to help, I think, the individuals that we work with understand what their personal barriers are, how they're contributing to those barriers, also how they're thinking about those barriers. Are they really barriers? Are they opportunities? So what gets in the way? Getting a really comprehensive list that's both surface level, but also that sort of level that's deeper and more personal about what gets in the way of us being successful. So okay. Those two questions tend to generate lots and lots of very long conversations. Sure. They're not short answers by and large.
So it's a more an unraveling type of thing that organically comes out as you're asking more questions, I guess.
Well, I think we've been doing a lot of work. To give you an example, we've been doing a lot of work with what I call knowledge leaders. So, a lot of businesses like HFL are leadership development businesses, so we deal with people leaders. But we've been doing a lot of work with people who are subject matter experts and actually don't have the same sort of structured career path, if you like, and career planning in most organisations. They're experts, so they could be reasonably mature, very well paid, got lots of knowledge, but they don't have either the status or the kudos or what have you in the organisation. And interestingly enough, when you start asking them what success looks like and what's getting in the way, they tend to blame the organisational settings a lot for their lot in life. I'm not respected, I'm not invited to meetings, the organisation, they never invite me to leadership meetings. So, I'm really important, but the organisation wouldn't work if I wasn't here. But I'm generally speaking on the lowest floor in the darkest corner, and people avoid me at all costs. So a typical life of a slightly disengaged subject matter expert. So the sorts of things that unravel, Sarah, in that conversation around barriers is what they're actually doing to create that personal brand, which is relatively negative for them. So generally speaking, what gets in the way, the sort of situational market factors to start off with, but then, as both of you would know, we start delving deeper into, well, what are you actually doing from a behavioural perspective, from a mindset perspective, to contribute to that state of affairs. And once we start unpacking some of that stuff, that's where people really begin to get some clarity about how they can change things.
Yeah. And Alister, with you as personally, what are the questions that you ask yourself? I don't know if you ask in the morning or at night, but the important questions that you're asking yourself each day.
Good question.
Thank you.
It's a terribly good question. Where's the notice? I think it is a great question because I think as we're working with people who spend a lot of money on our services and spend a lot of time and take a lot of time. I think the biggest question from my perspective whenever I'm spending time with someone is how can I add value to this person? And I think that's true almost for all of us as professionals, whatever we're doing. Even if we're going to a meeting, we should be asking ourselves, how can I add value to this meeting? And indeed, how can I get in the way of value being added, by my behaviour? There are moments in all of our professional lives where I think we conclude that we can't add value. Like, for example, if we don't have good chemistry, we don't have good trust, and what have you, or we've got the wrong sort of experiences, maybe we can't add value to that person. So I think finding the value, where does the unique value reside? Where can I help this person? Is a pretty good guiding sort of true north question, I think, to ask. The other one that I'm constantly asking my team, and I'm constantly asking my consulting team, is how can we do this better? We have a thing called the 10% rule. So we say, if we were to do this thing again, how can we do it next time we do it 10% better? That might be 10% faster, it might be 10% cheaper, it might be same effort, same cost, but 10% more effective. There's a whole range of ways we can look at that, but in today's world where we have to adapt and we have to be dynamic and we have to be adding more value all the time, how can every time we do something we do it 10% better is a pretty good question to help you begin to navigate maintaining competitive advantage, maintaining career momentum, all of these sorts of things, I think. So those would be the two things that I'm constantly asking myself. I don't always have the answers, I might say. But,
I think we all do.
Nobody's got all the answers. No, actually, one of the things Alister I heard the other day, and you'd like this, Sarah, is when you're meeting with a client for the first time, somebody said to me, always ask, what do I need to do for this to be a 5-star experience? And that way you get the feedback straight away from people, and you can level expectations with your customers too, because if they say, well, we want this, this and this, and that's just impossible for you to provide that, well, you can then have the conversation up front and they're not going to be disappointed. You can, it's a great opportunity to level expectations, but it's also a great opportunity to really understand, isn't it, what's important to them.
Yeah.
And I am going to, if I may, take one more question, Alister, and that is, what is it, the first question you gave us today is what drives you, what's your passion, what gets you out of bed in the morning. So if we look at HFL and into the future, what is the driving force, what's the motivation that keeps you going all the time?
Okay, well, a great question, and that is definitely a question that we've asked ourselves a lot over the last 3 years. I think the market has changed dramatically, as we all know, in the last 3 or 4 years. Competition is different. We've got a completely new workforce coming through that has different requirements of leaders and so on and so forth. And so our objective over the next sort of 2 to 3 years is to try and completely reinvent the way leadership skills are developed in people. I personally think that the vast majority of leadership courses people go on don't work. They don't deliver long-term behavioural change to those leaders. And if you talk to a lot of CEOs and CFOs, they tell you the same thing. They've been on courses that might have been slightly useful, and they've been on courses that have been a complete waste of time. So I think the whole market is changing, and even the very the topic and the product that you're doing here, which is video, it's podcast, it's discussions, it's interaction, and this whole concept of we're going to send you on a course to teach you how to be a leader, I think is very last century, and I don't think we've quite yet nailed what new century is. So that's the sort of thing that keeps us going on a constant basis. And absolutely to your point, Mark, that 5-star experience, what would someone coming to any sort of interaction, what would delight them? What would make them an incredible advocate for that to somebody else, which is your 5-star thing. I think we're constantly looking at ways to seriously enrich the participant experience and to put the participant in control of the experience, so they're actually driving their own development rather than having development done to them, which has tended to be the model in the past. So thank you for allowing me to get that one out.
And if you looked in 3 years' time, Alister, and looked at your life, professionally and personally, what would you have liked to have changed, and where would you like to be in that time?
So I think I'd like to be able to spend more time exploring new ideas and less time doing stuff. That's the aim of most consultants today. So the change to the relationship between the amount of face-to-face that I'm doing and do a bit more research and development. And to be honest with you, I'd like to do less work with senior leaders, because I've got a lot of work with senior leaders, and do much more with front leaders, emerging leaders, who are the most awesome, fulfilling group that I work with. They are inspirational, and they're keen to learn, and they're desperate to know how to do it well, and I just have a lot of fun with that group. So I think those are the sorts of things that I like. From a business perspective, we'd like to be offering stuff that people want for all the time. I think that's true of every business, but in the leadership space, we'd like to feel like people are coming to us to experience the journey rather than an event, which tends to be the case at the moment.
Just in regard to HFL, Alister, do you want to just spend a minute telling us exactly what it is that you specifically do, and more importantly, what's your ideal client profile, your target market. Who are the people that are most likely to come to you because you are best suited to serve that market?
Yeah, I actually don't have an answer to that second question, but if I deal with the first one first, we basically are a boutique leadership development company, so we help organisations develop their leaders, and the first stage of that quite often is to decide what sort of leadership is required in that business to satisfy customers today and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and quite often that's where we would start, and we then assess the leadership cohort that business has got to see the extent to which they're ready to step up for those future challenges of leadership, and then we'd build development programs, whether they might be workshops, coaching, mentoring systems, simulations, you name it, whatever it takes to help those people get to be the better leaders that they need to be. In terms of size of company, it varies absolutely dramatically. We have several ASX 100 companies in Australia. We have a global company based out of Singapore, and so on and so forth. So large companies, and we have lots of small companies. We deal with some leaders one-to-one, all sorts of ranges from senior leaders down to junior leaders. So it's very, very varied. And actually the variety is, one of the things that makes it most enjoyable. Actually, you're not just doing stuff at one level. And in a lot of companies, we do programs at both levels. So once we've spent some time with their junior leaders, we then might spend some time with their senior leaders, and that's really valuable because quite often the senior leaders have got no idea what the junior leaders are thinking or doing, or so on and so forth. So we can add some value, across the way.
I like the way you said.
Hopefully that answers.
I like the way you said it was very varied, though. That was good. But there's one other thing, Alister, and I understand one of the programs you run or you have access to is where people can do a bit of horsing around, and that's the Primal Leadership Program. Any comments you have in regard to that program?
Well, I think that program is going to be very interesting for us to work with you guys around, because it does go to that, as I was mentioning with a lot of the questions that we're asking, which is your point is, we really need to tease out the fears and concerns and belief systems of people to help them understand how they show up. And obviously, working with horses and my understanding of that program really helps people get to know who they really are, and also how to, build relationships. And building relationships is probably now, in our networked world, probably more important than it's ever been. It's really a core competency, and that really contributes to it. So we're looking forward to working with you at some stage on that program as soon as we can.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And so with just on that topic with experiential learning, because we now know the retention rate of doing courses is 25% by the third day. Can you just expand on the follow-up and, like you said, the journey of doing something that's, sorry about that, something that's memorable, so people actually remember that and retain the knowledge, and it lands back into the workplace?
Yes, probably I think the most important thing I would have to say is that the learning doesn't really occur in the workshop. The learning really occurs back in the business, and I think most of us know this now, and the research is very clear. So with all of our programs, for example, we pretty much focus on how the skill will land back in the business. So, for example, with the knowledge leaders I was just describing, they, at the end of whatever the course is, they have to actually do a presentation, generally to a panel of senior leaders. They have to make some commitments about what they're going to do differently, what they personally are going to do differently, but also what they're going to do differently with their peers and their teammates and so on and so forth. and then we do a series of check-ins over a 6-month period, and at the end of the 6-month period we ask them to tell us whether they've actually delivered on those or not. So some of those sessions are formal, some of those sessions are informal, but it's actually maintaining the momentum of what they do. I mean, we've all been on courses where at the end of the last day we go, right, we're going to go and do all this stuff, we're going to be renewed people, you know, and then we get back into the workforce and there's 62,000 emails and everyone's knocking on the door saying, where have you been for 3 days? And you get dragged back into the vortex of the business, and suddenly all that enthusiasm gets dissipated very quickly. So we're very hard on making sure that we're constantly checking back in with them. For most people leaders, they say that they begin to lose enthusiasm because they hit some speed bumps at about 6 months. For knowledge leaders, interestingly enough, it's 4 months. They lose energy faster for some reason we haven't quite understood yet, but we know it happens. So those sorts of things I think are really critical. And our data is, because we survey people extensively 6 to 9 months post-program, and where the clients have invested in that follow-up program, the deployment of new skills is 3 times higher than if they don't do it. So it gives you a sense of, you know, it's really worth the effort. And of course, all of the people who have deployed stuff feel way better about it. You know, they feel like the whole thing was worth the effort.
Well, it's sustainable change, isn't it? It's follow through and transformation that's actually sustainable.
And some of the behaviours that you know the two of you and our team work on with these people are serious behaviours to change. They're changing habits of a lifetime in many instances. With a lot of senior leaders, they've been taught to tell people what to do, and we're telling them, no, you need to ask them what they like to do.
Which comes back to that question thing, right? It comes back to it's great questions. It's not what you tell people, it's what you ask.
Literally, then asking questions is a huge behavioural change for most of them, and then of course the second one is actually waiting to listen to the answer. You know, is also a pretty critical factor. So, so it's ridiculous for us to suggest that we should just tell them what to do, and after they go and they're going to do it. They need to practice it. They're going to fail. We need to literally, from your perspective, get them back on the horse again. And you know, I think that's part and parcel of what the what the exercise is.
Alister, if I may finish with just one question, and may put you on the spot a little bit here, but if you go back through your life and you look at some of the greatest impacts you've had on people, does a question come to mind that you asked in that situation which led to a discovery by the person you were talking to which helped them the most with the progress they ended up making? Is the one thing that comes to mind for you?
I don't necessarily think it's one question, but it's or maybe it's a subliminal question. It may well be a subliminal question, which is, and it's certainly, you know, I think of 2 or 3 of my more junior staff, and you know, every month I'm sitting in front of them asking myself, what can I do as this person's leader to help them develop? And you know, where do they want to develop? How can I help them on that journey? What sort of experiences can I facilitate them having, which will help them? What sort of support do they need, and so on and so forth. And I think when I think back to my network of people that I've worked with now, many of them have gone on to be, you know, very successful because of themselves, not because of me, but that culture of development and growth and how can we be better. That's probably the thing that we got going early and has sustained them and in, you know, the businesses that they're running and the things that they're doing. So I don't know if that's quite the answer to your question, but it's that you know, how can we help people develop, and that sometimes means, of course, that you're developing them and they will then leave your company.
Sure.
You know, they will go somewhere else because you can no longer offer them the development, continued growth. If you're a larger company, you ought to be able to do that, but in a smaller company, sometimes that's not possible. And to be willing to let them go when the time is right and wish them the best and not try and hold them back, that's something that a lot of senior managers in the world really struggle with. but they need to get their brains around it, because the generation today is assignment based in the way of their thinking. They'll go to places where they can learn. As soon as they stop learning, they'll be off, and they can go with your blessing and therefore be very, very good brand advertisements for you and your business and so on and so forth, or you can be miserable, grumpy and nasty to them as they're leaving, and you destroy that legacy straight away.
That's right.
It's something.
But also they've created value for you along the way as part of their learning process. They've been really valuable to you. So it's been when you let them go and let them grow, that becomes a great outcome for everyone, I guess, doesn't it?
Well, this day and age,
Absolutely.
all you need is a computer to run a business, so you don't need these big offices anymore. And creating people that are creative and innovative is a success that you've got credibility over.
It's wonderful when you see people that you've worked with go on and do creative things, and of course people have the choice these days. A senior leader was saying to me the other day that these young people need to be they must be more they must wait longer. They need to just be calm down and wait a little bit longer. And I was saying to him, but they don't need to. There's a million jobs out there, and exactly as you say, Sarah, they can just decide, this weekend I'm going to set up a website and start a new business and see how we go. And I think that was really critical, which is that piece around recognizing that these people have made a significant contribution to your business while they've been there. Favour giving them a job, they are making a really significant contribution, and I think that's a really important mindset for people to have to think about, because that's just, if you're using business, involving them in decision making, asking their opinion, they will contribute They might be slightly high maintenance from an older person's perspective, performing and high contribution. So if you're leveraging that, then you're doing yourself a favour.
Yeah. Thank you, Alister. Well, that's very informative and great questions that you ask.
Absolutely.
And Harbour Future Leaders has a fantastic future ahead of you, and producing great leaders.
No, that's great. It's been a really interesting conversation with you, Alister. Thanks for your time today, and really got some good stuff out of the conversation. And for me, one of the key points was when you really nailed in on the fact that we can't tell people things anymore. We have to ask great questions, and that really ties in perfectly with obviously the theme of what we're about here. So on behalf of myself, Mark Westcott,
Sarah Cox,
thanks very much for watching Power of Great Questions.